How does a 9-year-old kid in Hawaii, a poor kid, get to this point?
I wasn't poor by most people's standards, but I came from a family with a poor attitude, if you know what I mean. Because rich, poor, middle class, poverty starts with a fundamental attitude. So I was in Hawaii, I was 9 years old. My father was the head of education, PhD, very smart man, good guy. And for some reason, we moved across town and I went to a school with rich kids. So this is a little town called Hilo, Hawaii. So when I was 9 years old, I moved to this rich kid's school. And suddenly I realized I was poor because it's relative, as Einstein, it's all relative. And my classmates were mostly white guys. And I was one of the few Asians in the class. And these guys, their fathers owned the banks, they owned the plantations, they owned the car dealerships, they owned the meat packing company, they owned the ranches. And I'm going, how come my dad doesn't own that? So I remember raising my hand when I was 9 years old, talking to my fourth grade teacher, and I said, when am I going to learn about money? And she was this woman who should have retired 50 years earlier. She was so sick and tired of kids by this time. She says, the love of money is the root of all evil. And I said, what am I, in Sunday school? And I was this punky little 9-year-old kid. And she says, we don't teach money at school. I said, why not? And she couldn't answer me. And she got very flustered. She said, sit down, take your seat. And then I got curious. I said, why don't we learn about money? She says, go ask your father. He's my boss. My father was the head of education. I go home and ask him, I said, why don't we learn about money in school? And he looked at me and said, because the government doesn't let us teach that subject. The government tells us what we can teach and what we can't teach. And I thought that was strange. And I said, but aren't we going to school to learn about money? He says, no, your job is to get a job. I said, but you get a job to earn money. He goes, no, you're supposed to just get a job. And I went, no. Isn't the purpose of a job to earn money? He goes, you're correct. I said, so why don't I just learn about money? I can skip the job part, And he got flustered. And my father was, for Japanese, very tall, 6'4", and imposing man. Good guy. But he says, well, learn about money. Why don't you ask your best friend's father about money? And I said, why? That's Mike. So I asked him. He says, because Mike's father is an entrepreneur. And I said, what are you? He says, I'm an employee. I'm a government employee. And I went, oh, what's the difference? He says, the difference is an entrepreneur must know about money, or they're no longer entrepreneurs. And he says an employee doesn't have to know anything about money because the government will take care of them, the company will take care of them. So I'm all confused. But I took my dad's advice and I trundled over to Mike's father's office and knocked on his door, and I said, hey, I'm here, 9 years old, teach me about money. He says, beat it, kid, But that's where the story of Rich Dad, Poor Dad started. And finally, through persistence, my rich dad started teaching me about money on one condition, and that condition was he would never pay me. He says, the moment I pay you, you think like an employee. He says, that's the trap. Entrepreneurs work for free. And now I'm 9 years old, my head's cracking in half. He says, you never want a paycheck. You understand that, kid? I said, okay, I got it. And he says, well, how do I make money? He says, that's what entrepreneurs figure out. So how do I learn about money? So he would just break out a Monopoly game board. So I would work for free. I'd pick up cigarette butts and get hotels and restaurants, and I would clean and do menial tasks. And as I got older, I started getting into office work and marketing and accounting, and I was an apprentice basically, but I always worked for free. And he would teach me about money. But the way he taught me about money was playing Monopoly. And finally one day I got upset. I said, well, when are you going to teach me about money? He says, what do you think we're doing? We're playing Monopoly. He goes, no. What do you think we're doing? We're playing Monopoly. He says, what do you think we're doing? I don't know. I'm teaching you about money. And then that's when, you have one greenhouse. He says, there's many formulas for great success in money. There's thousands of them. But one of the best ones found on the game of Monopoly. Still is today. 4 greenhouses, 1 red hotel. I said, what? He says, one of the greatest ways to acquire great wealth is playing Monopoly in real life. 4 greenhouses, 1 red hotel. Well, is that all there is? He goes, that's it. And he says, what do you think I'm doing? And I went, I don't know. So then he took me out and he showed me his greenhouses. And 10 years later, when I was 19, I was now in school in New York, and I come back to Hawaii, and Rich Dad had bought the biggest piece of land smack dab in the middle of Waikiki Beach. And when you go to Waikiki Beach today, you'll see the Hyatt Regency Hotel. That was his hotel, just like the game of Monopoly. He just kept what's called an assemblage, because that property wasn't that big at that time. So he had to buy out all the small guys, because Waikiki was a little dirtwater little town. So he'd buy out this shop owner and buy that shop owner. And it took him a while, but he finally assembled this large piece of property. And then he and Hyatt put up this giant hotel. And it just sold for $800 million. So that's how I learned about money. So today when people ask me what I do, they know me as the author of Rich Dad, Poor Dad. I just say I play Monopoly. So I own greenhouses, I own big hotels, I own oil wells, golf courses, businesses. I'm just playing Monopoly. That's all I do. Einstein said, imagination is more important than knowledge, but knowledge empowers imagination. And what most people lack is real business knowledge, like accounting, like debt, like taxes. You got to know that stuff, but they don't teach it in school to anybody. So people ask me, how did your rich dad learn this when your poor dad, a PhD, didn't? And the answer is very simply, my rich dad, who's my best friend's father, his father died when he was 13. So his rich dad had this family business at 13 to run. So he had to drop out of school, which was his blessing. There's blessings, and sometimes the blessing doesn't look like a blessing, but it turned out to be a blessing. And then his teachers became his bookkeeper, his accountant, his attorney, his banker, his real estate agents. So he has what I call real teachers, not these fake teachers in school. You see, most teachers in school, they're out of ethics. They teach subjects they themselves don't practice. I had the same problem in my MBA program. I got into arguments with the marketing teacher because the guy didn't have a business. And then I got into arguments with the accounting teacher because the accounting teacher didn't know accounting. I knew more about accounting than him because I actually worked in bookkeeping in my rich dad's companies. And so I'm not an accountant, but I understand accounting. So that was the end of my school years because I understood what a fake teacher is. A fake teacher is somebody who just wants a job and they'll teach anything. They teach how to shine shoes if you pay them more money. But they really don't know what they're teaching. For example, my calculus teacher, went to military school in New York, and I asked the teacher, I said, I'm in my third year of calculus now. It was called strength of materials. I said, am I ever going to use this stuff? He goes, no. Said, why do you teach it? I get paid. I said, do you ever use it? He goes, no. And that's why one of the things I suggest to people, you got to find a real teacher versus a fake teacher. And a fake teacher is somebody who doesn't do what they teach. And a real teacher is doing what they teach every day. So my accountants, my attorneys, they're in it every single day. That's how I learn, because every day I'm solving problems in my business. So I have accountants and attorneys and bankers and all these people on speed dial because I'm solving problems with my team. I went into school, I'd be thrown out because I threatened them. And to me, isn't school about opening your eyes and minds to new ideas? But that's now out of the system. So everybody's got to be PC, politically correct now. And it's killing us. It's killing the brains of our kids. They're going backwards. You take peanuts away from a child, their propensity to have peanut allergy goes up. So you get out a child, you say you can't have peanuts. So 17% will find out they're allergic to peanuts. But if you gave kids peanuts, only 3% would be allergic to peanuts. And that's kind of the metaphor the book starts with. He says we're actually making our students weaker in school. Poor people say, I can't afford it, I can't do that, I don't have time. Because it's an escape. It's an escape. It's easy to say I can't afford it. Oh, I'm too tired. Oh, I can't go to the gym. When you could go to the gym. But no, I can't. Truth is, I'm just too lazy to go to the gym. How can I afford it? How can I do that? What would it take? Or why should I do that? He says that a question opens the mind, a statement closes the mind. So when you say I can't afford it, your mind shuts down and you become what you say. But the thing is that we become creatures of our own habits. And until we break the habit, we don't change. People say, well, money is not that important to me. Then if money is not that important to you, I don't care about money. The money doesn't care about you. The word does become flesh. Or I'll never be rich. Or the favorite one is the rich are greedy. It's the poor that are greedy. If you think about it, because to be rich, you have to give something. I have to produce books and games, and I purchase real estate, I provide housing, provide jobs and all that. That's why I'm rich. But greedy people produce nothing. You point a finger forward, three are pointing back. As we know, there's a big attitude problem against the rich today. The way you get rich, you solve other people's problems. If you could cure cancer today, you'd be a trillionaire. You'd be an instant trillionaire. How does a guy like me, a little kid with no money, and it wasn't I was poor, we're very middle class. I think my father was making about $20,000 a year. And when I graduated from school, from college, I was making $120,000 a year, 6 times the amount he made. And I was 21 years old. And he goes, how'd you do that? I said, I didn't go to the same school you went to. I just followed my heart. I went to school to be a ship's officer to sail. So I sailed all over the world. And back this was in the 60s, if you sailed into the war zone, Vietnam, which I did, you got double the pay and no taxes. So that's how I was making $120,000 a year. And I come back back, my father's still making $20,000 a year. I'm making $120K. And he can't understand it because he's a poor man in mind and in soul. You know, people who are afraid of making mistakes, like they teach in school, they don't ever grow, because spirituality is there's good and there's bad. There's right and there's wrong. There's up and there's down. Most people only want to be right. They only want to be positive. Well, you can't have that. That's not reality. And the average person, the reason they're poor is they haven't failed. You know, they play it so safe